Folks, what does the election of 2020 and the month of January this coming year and the WEF have to do with the end times? Find out in today's show. You're not going to want to miss it. Well, greetings everybody. Prophecy in the Spotlight. Glad to have you with us today. Brother Dan Goodwin here, my co-host, Dr. Charles Hiltibidal. Doc, we're going to be talking about a very important subject today. A reset, a global reset.
It's coming.
All right. Tell us a little bit about what the show's about. What are we going to do today?
Well, the world's talking about the global reset.
And it is. It's everyone's talking about it.
Yes, it is. And we want to talk about that. We want to discover that the Bible told us already in the beginning this was what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. I want you, if you would, to read a passage for a couple of verses in Zechariah that you mentioned to me, and I'd like for you to read those. And let's just start right there.
Well, Zechariah had 8 visions. The 7th vision is just before the millennial reign vision of the 8th one. And so that's talking about the time or the setting of the stage just before the millennial reign. So it begins in chapter 5 and verse number 5 of Zechariah. Let me get to Zechariah instead of Daniel. And verse number 5 says, "And the angel which talked with me went forth, said unto me, Lift up now thine eyes and see what is that goeth forth. And I said, What is it? And he said, It's an ephah that goeth forth. He said, Moreover, this is their resemblance through all the earth." So the vision here is something that's not just in Israel, but it's a global thing. Then when you get to the last verse of that vision, verse 11 says, "And he said unto me," the reason for it all is to build in a house in the land of Shinar, and it shall be established there and set there upon her own base. So it appears that something that happened in Shinar, history past, is going to be repeated just before the millennial reign, because it's something that infects the entire world.
Okay,
Yes.
and so this global reset, in your mind, could be that.
I think it probably is.
And now, this global reset, there's a lot of facets to it, but
Yes,
one of them is globalism,
absolutely.
the world coming together.
The entire world, they've found some things that resonate with the greater majority of the entire world. Sometimes we in the Christian community, we really have a difficulty of fathoming how lost people in the world really think. And but if we could be able to back up far enough to be able to see, they have found some things that resonate with the greater majority of the world, which, by the way, of course, is lost.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna read some passages here in Daniel chapter 7.
Yes.
But let me say this first to the folks out there. Let me say that first of all, what we're talking about is prophecy.
Oh yes, it's prophecy.
People say, well, what does this have to do with the end time? Everything. Because the end times is what I'm going to read in Daniel chapter 7 here. Because Daniel chapter 2 talks about the statue. And we've mentioned that before. Mm-hmm. The times of the Gentiles began with Nebuchadnezzar, the head of gold. Mm-hmm. And the times of the Gentiles is going to end after the tribulation, after Armageddon.
That's the end of it.
Yeah, with that final kingdom, the 4 kingdoms, and that 4th kingdom becomes the 5th kingdom.
Yes.
And that's what we see in Daniel 7. Of course, Daniel chapter 2 is the statue, the head of gold and all that.
It's man's perception of the Gentile rule.
Daniel 7 looks at it as wild beasts.
That's God's perception.
Right. And then Revelation 13 looks at the same 4 kingdoms, but it starts at the forward and goes backwards all the way back to Babylon. Yep. And so you tie all these together and you get a picture here of the kingdoms of the world. But Daniel 7 seems to do something that you see something in Daniel 7 you don't see in Daniel 2.
Right.
Yep. You see you see almost a twofold look here. Let me just read some of this here. I want to read the whole chapter, but we don't have time. But it says here in verse 7, after this I saw in the night visions, behold, a fourth beast. We're mainly going to talk about the fourth beast here, because that fourth beast becomes the final empire.
Becomes the final.
So, up here in verse 3, 4 great beasts came up from the sea. But we're going to skip the first 3 here and go right to the fourth beast, called a dreadful beast and terrible and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. I don't have time to get into it, Doc, but in my 7 Clocks a Ticking book, I deal with that thing about diversity and diverse. It's got absolutely nothing to do with Nephilim. It's got nothing to do with angels. But today, the sci-fi crowd, the prophecy crowd has gone into this thing about diversity and diverse seed.
Well, when you keep this in its context, where you just read, you're talking about kingdoms.
That's right.
And he's talking about how that the final kingdom, out of the fourth one that develops into the Antichrist rule, it's different. It's not only different, but it's diverse in many facets.
Right. It's going to be made up of all different cultures and different nationalities and languages.
And the European Union has been the model that's being worked on to try to... Because America became a melting pot. Everybody from the world came to America and melted together. Oh, so the European Union, they said, well, let's come together, but let's keep our diversity.
Yeah.
And they're working on the model that's going to finally develop.
And it's a disaster.
It's a disaster.
Yeah. I mean, all different religions, different cultures, different beliefs, different moral values.
But that's what you're just reading here.
Now, I have a statement in my book, and it says this: diversity does not strengthen a kingdom, it weakens a kingdom. Yeah. And it weakens this final kingdom.
That's why the final kingdom will be easily taken over by the strong leader himself.
All right, let me read some more of this here. It was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And then verse 8, I considered the horns, and beheld there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns. Of course, the little horn, I believe, is the Antichrist.
Yes.
All right, let me skip down a little bit here. Verse 9, I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit. That's the Lord. I like that term, Ancient of Days, because he's timeless.
That's it.
Ancient. Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. Let me skip on down now to verse 18. In verse 17, these great beasts, which are the 4 kingdoms, are 4 kings. He's explaining the vision now.
Yeah.
He's explaining to Daniel what the vision really was. And you get down here to verse 15. Daniel was grieved because he didn't understand. And so the Lord's going to explain it to him. And he says in verse 17, these great beasts, which are 4 kings, which shall arise out of the earth, but the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. That's after Armageddon, obviously. So chapter 7 takes these kingdoms, but actually looks at them in a twofold way, a literal and a prophetic way.
Right.
And verse 19, then I would know the truth of the 4th beast. Daniel was so fascinated with this 4th kingdom. He didn't say much about the first 3. But that 4th one, he was fascinated with it. And it says here, I would know the truth of that 4th beast, which was diverse. And there's that diversity again. Now, see, the sci-fi crowd, the sci-fi prophecy crowd, comes along and tells us this diverse is talking about fallen angels and Nephilim intermingled. That is just not true at all. That is not what this is talking about.
Got to keep it in context.
And I would admonish you at home, get my book, The 7 Clocks a Ticking. There's a chapter in there where I deal with this. I got several pages where I talk about what this diverse. I give all the different places in the Bible the word diverse is used. Jude, it talks about it in the book of Jude, and they see this diverse seed, and they jump to the conclusion of Satan's seed.
I understand.
And it's not that at all.
No, it's not.
He's talking about the nations of the world, all diverse.
Yes, sir.
And that brings a weakness, not a strength. And that's true in America. You bring diversity of moral values, a diversity of beliefs and religions and languages.
Yep.
You got confusion, just
Yes,
like the Tower of Babel.
So
So
that's part of the world return.
the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron. Of course, the iron, that's the iron in Daniel chapter 2 in the statue. It's Rome. But this is not Rome as it was. This is the Rome as it will be. In the coming Antichrist kingdom. We call it the revised Roman Empire. And let's see, he's going to devour and break in pieces the residue with his feet. Verse 20, the 10 horns are mentioned. And now let me move on down to verse 23 here. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from the kingdoms and shall devour the whole earth. See, he's going further there. It's not only the fourth kingdom in history, the Roman Empire, but it's the Roman Empire that's coming back
in the
that's
future,
going to rule the whole world here. And it says it devours the whole world. And he shall tread it down and break in pieces, and the 10 horns out of this kingdom, which is the 10 horns that will make up this final Roman Empire, this Antichrist kingdom. And tread it down, break it in pieces. Verse 24, and the 10 horns out of the kingdom of the 10 kings that shall rise, and another shall arise after them. He shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings, and he shall speak great words against the Most High. And now this is during the tribulation, obviously.
Yes, it is.
So as you read this, you got to pay attention, and you understand that, yes, there was a fourth kingdom called the Roman Empire. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about that kingdom as it's going to be in the future.
And we're watching that now.
And that's what we're going to discuss today.
That's what's happening.
Okay, let me finish this here and get you going. He shall speak great words against the Most High, that's the Lord, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and dividing of time. So let's jump into this, Doc, and talk about this kingdom that's coming. Actually, we believe it's here now, this kingdom.
It's being formulated. Yes, sir.
So what is it that has given us the environment that allows this to happen?
Well, something several years ago, they began talking about global warming. And Mr. Al Gore was the vice president, and they began putting scientists together and all of this, and they found something that resonated with the world. Everybody wanted to save their planet, as if we're losing it. And so the idea of global warming, and it caught on with a great number of people. As a matter of fact, there were accords signed that President Trump has taken us out of with the world. And so I believe it began recently with a basis of trying to save the world. They call it Mother Earth, of course.
Yeah.
They better be concerned about Father God. But so I think they found something that resonated with them. It began with global warming, and then of course they changed that to climate change when finally somebody put a little facts to it and said, it's not really heating, it's cooling. By the way, if it's heating and there's really more carbon, that means the plants will get even greener.
Yeah.
Rather than brown. In other words, they had it totally upside down. But they found something that resonated with the greater majority of the world that could get them involved. And so they began with that. And then now we've got this pandemic that they call it. It's affected the entire world. And so they brought all of this together for the elites to be able to push their agenda. And the agenda is a one world order. That's their goal.
Now on that note, I want to let the audience know you've got a DVD that you've sold hundreds of. called The Pandemic.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
That's on our website. It's on your website, but they can get there by going to Prophecy in the Spotlight, and they can click on your bookstore there, and you still have those.
Had several orders this week.
That's still as applicable as it ever was.
Yeah, and people are asking, won't you do a follow-up? And we probably will here in the next few weeks. But,
we might be doing it from prison. I don't
know. But they found some things that resonated with the world, and once they had their attention, they began putting together plans of, hey, let's balance the world out here. Hey, you folks that have got green gases and you're running the environment, you ought to pay into a fund. So all of the advanced world's got to pay money, but folks out in the deserts and in the wilderness at third country world said, they shouldn't have to pay as much. So they began working on credits. And even people would buy your credits, or talked about carbon footprints. It's amazing, the ones that talked about that were the ones making the biggest footprints. But anyway, so they found these mechanisms, and one thing's led to the next to the next. And now with this pandemic, and they got the entire world's attention, and whether it's all fact or not, it's still got the entire world locked down. Yeah. And as a result, they're able to move their agenda up many years, and the global program is, it's right at the doorstep.
Now, 4 years ago, a man named Donald Trump threw a wrench in the whole thing.
Yes, he did. Yes.
I mean, he pulled us out of the... he's just...
We were headed... globalism is headed down the train track. And you're not going to stop it, because the Bible in prophecy has already told us, as you just read a while ago, we are headed to a one world order. Yep. You're not stopping that. But God knows where the timing is, all of this. And as you said, I'm confident that President Trump slowed it up. And if he's reelected after all of this stuff takes about, I think he might continue to slow it a little. But with this pandemic, Dad, I don't think anybody's going to slow what's kicked in high gear.
I agree. Now, you mentioned to me something about never let a crisis go to waste. How does that apply to this?
Well, hey, as a matter of fact, I have the documents of the statements from the leader of the UN stating very same thing. We have but a short time to take advantage of this situation. What he's talking about, the advantage of the pandemic to set up the world organization that they would like to be the ones running it. The liberal crowd and the Linsky crowd and all the rest of them and socialism, that's always been their motto. You don't want to ever let a good crisis go to waste. So that's what they're doing. They're taking full advantage. I'm not saying that that COVID is not a disease. We've dealt with this already in the past. And we're not minimizing that, because I just had a good friend. I just had a cousin we buried last week died as a result. I'm telling you, it's real. But so is the flu, and so is cancer, so is heart disease, all of these things. And but they found a tool that is touching the entire world, and they're able to use it for their advantage.
Now, you mentioned this thing about the reset. Global warming and climate change began the world thinking towards a global reset. What do you mean by that?
Well, they begin thinking about saving their planet. It wasn't just an elite crowd here. It wasn't just a segment of educators here or a segment of politics, but it was something on a global scale where they were making country by country accords and agreeing to all of this, and sustainability and all of these things that the WAE, all of these things are working out. And it all began in the modern setting with the pursuit of saving the planet.
Now, let me ask you a question. I know Satan is behind all of this, ultimately.
Sure.
But there are some bigwigs out there, and I'm going to read a few things here in a few minutes from a meeting that happened in June of this year. But how many of the people at the top do you think are in on this, or do they know it's a scam and they're just using it, or do you think some of the people at the top really believe in this Mother Earth stuff?
Well, I think some of them at the top really believe in it.
Yeah.
I think they're very convinced.
So they're deceived.
They're totally deceived. Then you have a segment that are involved in it because they're in with the money. I mean, they're already raising trillions of dollars on a global scale through the UN. I think Marcon, in just a few hours on the phone, they raised almost $7 trillion to deal with the pandemic. I mean, can you imagine raising $7 trillion in a few moments of phone calls?
You know, since you mentioned that, let me interrupt and say this. There's a lot of scientists who have come out and endorsed the global warming.
Mm-hmm.
I believe I heard somebody talk about that, made the statement that it's because they're receiving money from the government.
Sure.
You want to
the greater I happen to be involved in creation research with our museum, and I can tell you that the greater majority of all of the research that's done in all of the institutions of the world, they're all done by the monies that are given to them from governments. Some of those are also outside entities that finance those things. And those outside entities are also tied with their governments. And so the greater majority of the research that is done, we're talking billions of dollars worth. In order for that research to be done, these scientists are getting their funding through federal programs. So if I gave you a report that put a bad light on what the government is producing, I might lose my grant.
Yeah. And
so I'm going to sign on so I can keep doing my research.
Makes sense. Money, follow the money.
You follow the money.
Because I understand there are hundreds, if not thousands, of scientists that have signed a document against global warming.
But do you ever see that? No, because see, the media is able to control the narrative to a greater extent.
And so the deeper subject here is not the global warming. The deeper subject is they're using this for an agenda of globalism.
They're using it for an agenda that's driving the world closer together for a common cause. I mean, if you get people involved in a common cause, we may not agree on a lot of things, but if the common thing we agree on is more important to us than the things we don't agree on, they brought us together.
And eventually, somebody has to rise to the top of that global system.
It's already there. I mean, you hear people talk about the Illuminati and all these other organizations out here. A lot of people just slough that off and say, well, that's a bunch of conspiratorial stuff. You need to understand there is a structure behind all of this. And as you mentioned, the devil, I'm convinced, is the mastermind behind it all. But there are a lot of people that they're sold on the Kool-Aid.
Well, in just a minute, I'm going to ask you to speak on the subject about pantheism and the fact that moving away from Christianity has fueled this thing, because no Christian would believe in Mother Earth.
No.
I'm going to have you deal with that, but let me read just a little bit from this article. This is dated June 24th. This is from Fox Business, believe it or not. Fox Business, June 24th. This is by a man named Justin Haskins. The viewers, if they wanted, could go online, look this up. June 24th, Fox Business, Justin Haskins. And I want to give him credit. He did a great job on this article. This is an article about, in fact, the title is this: Al Gore, UN Secretary General. That's that guy, I can't pronounce his name, Guterres, or I can't say it. And others are demanding a great reset of global capitalism.
Yes, sir.
So let me just read a little bit of this, and next week we're gonna do another show. I'll read some more of this, but we're gonna let me just whet their appetite, and then I want you to deal with the fact of why Christianity, or lack thereof, is actually fueling this thing.
Right.
And so I want to make sure I leave you some time at the end here. But he says this. By the way, this is the WEF. Had a meeting in June. The WEF is the World Economic Forum, WEF, another one of them alphabet organizations. Yeah. And this is actually in Geneva, Switzerland, and was formed in 1971. That's a long time ago. I was 11 years old in 1971. You were older than that, but He says the economic, social, and political chaos caused by the COVID-19 outbreak and Black Lives Matter protest have captured the attention of virtually every American. And for good reason. These are incredibly important issues worthy of significant and thoughtful debate. But while most Americans have been preoccupied with protests and pandemics, and by the way, there's a whole lot more of that coming with the election stuff going on. While the world's been occupied with the pandemics and protests, a bigger story has managed to slip beneath the radar, and I want to shed some light on that today. A growing movement among the world's most powerful leaders to call for a reset of the entire global economy.
Yes, sir.
Now, Doc, I don't know for sure what that means, a global financial reset, but I know it's not good. But I'm going to stop right there because we only got about 2 minutes left or so. I want you to deal with this Christianity aspect. In a Christian nation, if we were a strong Christian nation, this global warming and this Mother Earth stuff wouldn't be happening.
Wouldn't be happening.
So touch on that for us.
We need to understand that the greater majority of the world is not Christian. And so the worship of creation is pantheism, the worship of creation itself. Romans chapter 1 talks about that.
So the word pantheism, the scientific word, that's what that is talking about.
That's what it's talking about. So the worship of creation as God. They hug the tree. They got God in the tree, whatever.
Right, and you were going to mention Romans 1 that actually says that.
Yeah.
We worship the creation
rather than the creator.
Right.
And that's what pantheism, it's the worship of creation as God. And all your Eastern mysticisms and all that's built on pantheism. And so what's happening is if the earth is our God, we need to save our God. And so it harmonizes and resonates with the greater majority of the world. And to you and I that are Christian, that have the Holy Spirit, and we understand the Word of God, we look at it and say, how in the world can you believe these things? But they're lost and they see it that way. So it's not hard to convince them to give up here, to do this, fall in line here, do whatever, in order to save Mother Earth.
Yes, sir.
And so the answer is to share the gospel with the lost world.
All right.
And that's what we want to do is tell folks, if you're not born again, you need to receive Christ as your Savior. The Bible said, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of heaven. And unless a person gets born again, he cannot see that he's wrong in these areas of pantheism.
Man. Well, we're coming right back at you next week. We're going to hit on this again. We're going to go a lot further. We're going to jump right into it next week, so you don't want to miss it. But until next week, keep your eyes on them skies.